Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chris Buckley, and I'm part of the 405 Improvement Project Community Outreach Team. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for this online meeting. I'll be providing a brief update on activities at the Bolsa Chica Road Bridge, and we'll discuss in further detail the concerns the community has raised since the start of construction and how those will be addressed. We'll follow this with a Q&A session. If at any time you get disconnected, just hit the reconnect button, big reconnect button on your screen, and you'll be reconnected to our meeting. There will be two ways, I mentioned this in an email to folks, but there'll be two ways to ask a question. One is to type it into the chat box, or you'll see a button on the screen to raise your hand during the discussion. If you choose to join the conversation by raising your hand, we will add you to the presentation room. There is a brief period where a separate window is going to open up for you to check your microphone and camera. That's important. And I sent an email out earlier, and we have a guide in the files section that helps you, walks you through this. But it'll take a moment as that separate window comes up, checks microphone and camera, and then you'll be joining us in the conference room. So you'll be a window up on the screen for others to see. You can also, of course, choose to join just audio if you'd like. Once we're done with your question, we'll ask you, you'll leave the room, and then the next person will be able to ask a question, and we'll continue on from there. After you leave the room, you will need to click on the big play button to rejoin the webinar. So that's key. And we're gonna be on for as long as you need. We'll keep answering questions, whatever comes up. Whatever we can't answer, of course, we'll take back and talk to the technical team and try to get your response as soon as possible. Some of you may prefer not to actually join the room and be live, be either video or audio. So the other option we have is you take a look at your screen and there's a chat box. You're able to type your question in there. We are monitoring those, and I'll respond to them throughout the course of the Q&A session. I'll be repeating the question so everybody can hear it and providing an answer as well. Meanwhile, I want you to take a look under the Files section. So there's a Files tab at the bottom of the right of the screen, should be. And you'll see several PDFs there. These include, of course, the latest project fact sheet, our bridge map and fast facts, Express Lanes FAQ, and the Express Lanes access map. Many of you have already seen this information as collateral, and it may not be relevant to you right now, but I wanted to provide it. In addition, we've included a PDF with details about a community wall that we'll be discussing during the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Nikki Wright with OCTA and Adolfo Ozaeta with the City of Westminster, who are joining me for this presentation. They're both here on screen with me. I'd also like to acknowledge our outreach team members, Joey Fernandez, Asia Stansell, and Anna Finlay. They're working behind the scenes to keep the webinar running smoothly. They'll be managing your questions and communicating with the audience through the chat box and through little messaging at the top of the chat box, or it's actually, I think, across your screen. Finally, I wanted to let you know that the meeting is being recorded, and it'll be available in the next 24 hours or so. So if you missed something, or you know someone who couldn't join us tonight, head over to bit.ly/405 webinar Anawood. That's the same URL that was on the postcard you received. If you have any questions, or you lose the URL or didn't catch that, send us an email at 405project@octa.net, and we'll shoot you the URL so you can take a look. That'll be up tomorrow. All right, now I'd like to provide a brief status update on construction activities at Bolsa Chica. I'm going to get the presentation running, so give me just a moment here. All right, as many of you probably have noticed, demolition ongoing over the last few weeks here. That demolition is going to continue for a bit. They mostly are going to be working on removing the footings from the former second half of the bridge. And then we have a construction schedule overview. So this gives you a sense of the sort of longer term schedule over the next 12 months or so for the bridge work itself. The ramps will be following the bridge work. So pile driving is going to be coming up probably the middle of next month and going to extend into fall. The Abutment work, so those are the sides of the bridge, and you guys may remember that from the first phase. And the column construction in the middle, that's expected to start again after pile driving, so that'll happen later this year, fall, winter-ish. And then winter this year into spring of next year, you'll see them doing the false work installation. That's the support structure for the superstructure of the bridge, right? So they have those big girders, and remember, we had a few nights where that activity happened earlier this year, and that's prior to the installation of some false work, and ultimately prior to the concrete pour and the steel rebar work that happens to build the bridge itself. Then once that's completed in early 2021, somewhere in mid 2021 is when they'll be doing paving, striping, the signal work, the electrical, what we call civil work, right? So that's the curb and gutter, sidewalk, that stuff that happened actually not more than 6 weeks ago or so for the current phase. And so we anticipate Bolsa Chica Phase 2 opening in mid 2021. And then in fall, so later in 2021, they will be reconfiguring the southbound ramps. So that is, that new intersection that will be created and new alignment for the loop on ramp to southbound 405 and the new alignment for the southbound off ramp from southbound 405. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we've been discussing for some time, right? And talk a little bit about what's been happening. It as you know, has taken some time. Many of you have been asking questions. I know Mr. North and his wife and Ms. Burrell, Mr. Tu, all sort of asking questions about, hey, what's the status of these issues that we raised, more than a year ago? I do want to mention that we continue to do everything we can to be proactive and try to deal with the significant construction activity schedule, to try to be as communicative as possible. We're not perfect for sure, but trying to get the information out there to the community. We're trying, again, for that first half, really shifting as much work as possible to the daytime. That has been reiterated for the second half, that we want to shift as much work as possible to daytime. Ensuring contractor compliance, dust control, noise monitoring. We're always working with the contractor to make that better all the time. We have the K-rail, that's the concrete barrier with the safety fence and the screening on top of it. That will be in place for the duration of the work as needed. I'll talk more about that in a second. And then, as some of you have taken advantage of, we do have temporary lodging options. So, if you realize that it's just getting too much and the night work is just frustrating and you can't get any sleep, we do have that for you to take advantage of. But one of the things that OCTA has been doing is early on, after our discussion in September of 2018, the city of Westminster came to OCTA and said, hey, we'd like to discuss these issues further. Is there some way we can formally approach some of the issues that have been raised? For example, is there a way to extend the sound wall that's being built, the new sound wall that's part of the construction that's sort of curving around the back by Buckingham? That wall, it was developed per state and federal policies that identify criteria to be used to determine where sound walls are required. And based on the noise analysis that was prepared during the environmental phase of the project, that wall is where it is, and it's not intended to extend any further. So it's consistent with the state and federal policies related to noise mitigation, and it's being constructed now. It's again around the top of Buckingham, and there are no intentions to extend that wall. One of the other things that was discussed was how to deal with this loss of landscaping, right? A tremendous loss of landscaping that I know you all remember, and I know was very hard on the community. So what the city did was came to OCTA and said, hey, is there a way we can work with the landscape design plan? It was already ready to go at that point, but is there a way we can take a look and make some modifications to it? So OCTA did coordinate with the landscape designer for the project and has developed a modified landscape plan that increases the amount of landscaping puts in more mature landscaping. Still, though, it's not going to be fully mature as what you had, because you can't plant something like that. You have to really grow something like that, as I'm sure you all realize. And then the last piece of that is the addition of more trees. So we're going to be putting more trees in there than was originally planned. And I think the last thing, and I'd like to lead into this, the next slide here, is this idea of a community wall. And I want to talk a little bit about that wall. You have this as a PDF under the Files tab. So these, you can download the PDF, and it'll show you the, you can zoom in a little bit better, than, for example, I'll be able to zoom in on things. I'm going to turn the whiteboard on my presentation and do a little bit of drawing, just to draw your attention to some things. This may take me just a moment, so please bear with me. All right, so I'm going to clear that little dot there. There we go. So this community wall is something that the city really, on your behalf, pressed for, and it's meant to deal with the issues of privacy and also really the intrusion of light from this new intersection that's being created. And the wall is approximately 870 feet long. It's 8 feet tall. And as I'll show you on the next slide, it follows the elevation of the bridge. And you can see here, you've got sort of the light display that's going on from cars coming across, and it'll block that in all instances, right? You've got the same going on here, same going on here. So this wall, and I want to be important, the height and the length of the wall were determined based on a headlight study. We did an analysis of trucks and vehicles exiting the new southbound off-ramp, right? So it's modeled, obviously, and projected the headlight height and the horizontal spread of headlights approaching the end of the ramp and turning right and left onto southbound Bolsa Chica. So that's where you see, this analysis was done to ensure that the length of the wall was appropriate and the height of the wall is appropriate. So again, we're looking at about 870 feet long and 8 feet high. And we added addresses here so you can sort of see where the wall is going in relation to these addresses. And this wall, again, is meant to address lighting concerns, light intrusion from cars. And as pedestrians are walking up the bridge, you've got this increased elevation because, again, we've got a wider bridge and which makes it longer and higher. And so we wanted to try to address that issue based on some issues that you outlined with the city and that the city brought to OCTA. Caltrans has signed off on this. This wall meets Caltrans standards, and it's designed per their standards, just as an FYI. I'm going to move to the next slide here. I'm going to erase what I have on the whiteboard and show you a little bit more here. So what we've got here is the location again of the wall. In the bottom half of this, again, you see the same image as you had on the first overview screen. So you can see sort of where you are. But on the top half is more of a side view or an elevation view. And you can see the location of the wall starting from the left, extending about 870 feet, and it rises in elevation. So you have the ground level here. This is the ground level of homes. And it doesn't rise very much, the ground level. It's, obviously, a little bit down toward the south. So, because everything flows toward the ocean. But the wall starts here as the elevation of the approach to the bridge increases. And the wall continues all the way to the bridge. And right here, you can see that there is a bridge monument. And then connected to that is going to be a barrier. And this is not the actual height of the barrier. This is the height of the barrier plus a chain link fence on top. And you've actually seen that chain link fence. It already exists. I'm going to head back to this screen here. Let me clear my whiteboard. That's this chain link fence right here in this photo on top of that barrier, right? So I'll come back over here. What I was just pointing to is right here, okay? And again, there's a column concrete barrier right here, and the chain link fence on top of the concrete barrier. So this wall, I think, is important, and I like Adolfo. I don't know if you want to take a few moments and just talk about the efforts that went into this, but this wall is approximately a little over $600,000 is what the estimate is. So it's an important win for the community, right? I think that you guys really clearly expressed your concerns and your frustrations with the potential impact, and felt like some issues were forgotten when it comes to the sort of edges of the project, if you will. And your city, really worked hard to help uncover that story and talk about it and coordinate and collaborate with OCTA and Caltrans to make it happen. Adolfo?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for participating today, and really wanted to thank everybody for getting involved very early in the process. This is a very long corridor. We try our hardest to not leave any corner of the corridor unlooked at. We're looking for betterments for the community. That's something that we promised to the community members 15 years ago when we were looking at multiple alternatives for this project. The idea that the freeway project would not, quote unquote, cut through town, and then there would be a very obvious delineation between a brand new corridor and an older infrastructure belonging to the city. So we really worked hard with OCT over the last 15 years, but there was an oversight here. There definitely was. And we think we've done a lot to try to remedy that. Like Chris mentioned, the landscaping that's coming. But this wall, I think, is the most important element, because the way that the ramp is now going to be teed off, you would have had headlights shining over the community. And the fact that that vehicle now can go north or south, not just south like it does today, that presents a challenge to the community. So I do think that this wall is a huge win for the community. And I think the dollar tag that Chris put on there, that I don't believe that includes the design effort. And it definitely does not include the countless conversations we had with Caltrans staff, OCTA, as part of the environmental impact report review process that needed to be looked at in order to implement or arrive to consensus on this wall. We heard from the community loud and clear that they wanted it to be a K-rail underneath. I think I'm reading Cheryl's mind right now by mentioning this. And we proposed that as well. We also looked at the opportunity of maybe putting landscaping on the home side to make it more aesthetically pleasing. At the end of the day, though, this is Caltrans right-of-way. Caltrans is a state agency that has to maintain uniformity in all of the infrastructure that is installed within their right-of-way. So the K-rail was not something that they supported, as well as landscaping on the backside. Something else that Chris is asking me to talk about a little bit, and although these are still things that are being ironed out, is although this is being funded by the project, it is going to be the maintenance responsibility of the City of Westminster. Graffiti will be the responsibility of the City of Westminster. And if there were a traffic collision that results in damage to the wall, that would also be the City of Westminster's responsibility to repair it and then seek reimbursement from whichever insured motorist was a part of that traffic collision. So it definitely it's been a partnership getting here, and I think moving forward it's going to be the ultimate partnership where the City of Westminster is going to be maintaining something on city right-of-way, which is quite frankly not something the city is interested in doing, but we are doing it for this community because we think it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Adolfo. I would add that I mentioned earlier that there is existing temporary concrete barrier, the K-rail with the chain link fence on top and the screening. That will stay in place until this wall is constructed. This wall is currently in design. The design is expected to be completed probably by the end of next month, so end of July. But we don't have a schedule yet on construction. We're still working with that. As soon as we get that firm from the contractor, we will share that, of course, with the community. Definitely critical, we know, to get it in there. But in lieu of that, the temporary barrier will be in place. Temporary privacy screening will be in place. So I think at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions. I don't know if there are any that you want to put in the chat box. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at that. It looks like we have a few questions in there, so we'll take some of those. Meanwhile, if there's anybody who's interested in jumping in via audio and video, just go ahead and raise your hand, and the team will get that going. But I'll go ahead and start with some of the questions in the chat window. Nikki, if you can run those up for me.
Sure. Candace, I believe, well, her first question is why not? I believe she's referring to when you mentioned that the wall will not be extended.
Gotcha. And Candace, I'm not sure if you could put in the chat window maybe what your address is if you're further south, which I'm assuming that's the case. This wall is so this wall you're talking about noise is what it looks like. This wall is not meant to address noise. It's not a sound wall. It is a community wall. It's meant to address the light intrusion from vehicles coming off the off-ramp and the privacy concerns that were raised by the community because of the increasing height of the bridge approach and going over the bridge, and the loss of that privacy resulting from the removal of the landscaping. And we know that the landscaping can't be replaced as quickly, but this wall should assist. Yeah, so again, it's not the wall is not for sound mitigation, not for noise attenuation. I think is it Ida? Just to be clear, the wall that ends at Sherrill's house will not be extended behind the rest of our homes. That is correct. That wall can't be extended. The noise analysis and all the analysis done as part of the project. There was I was going to go back to my notes on this, but ultimately the noise analysis showed that a wall wasn't needed for going further south on that area. The noise that you may be dealing with is on Bolsa Chica Road, and the project doesn't address noise on at that point. So Debbie asks, I'm concerned that the wall ends just before my address. Where is my protection? So the wall is not meant for protection. It's meant to, again, address the light intrusion from vehicles coming off the off-ramp, and meant to address the privacy questions that came up as a result of the increase in the elevation as you approach the bridge and go across there. So there will be landscaping in that area. We need to get better sense of sort of where the boundaries of the landscaping are, but it will be within the entire state right of way. So I think that's something we can look at and see if you're concerned about privacy.
So Candace did comment saying yes, further south.
Gotcha.
And had another comment and question.
So if I could add a few things, Chris, is that okay?
Of course, absolutely. Please jump in.
So I did want to state that this is probably the fifth iteration of the wall design. I want to say that the first proposed wall was a lot shorter than this, and one of the controlling factors. We go back to the map. I can't see the map. I'm not sure what the community can see right now, but I think they'd rather look at the illustration. So
this one, right?
Yeah, that one's perfect. Yeah.
There we go.
The infographic, we'll call it. So the original wall was a lot shorter than this, really intended to address idling vehicles at a red light facing the community. That was the first designer's attempt to address our request for the community. And we felt that was that needed to be refined further because we were concerned about turning vehicles and the way that the light kind of disseminates over the neighborhood. And ultimately, we arrived to the conclusion that a fair terminus for the wall would be, if you go back to the elevation one now, to the profile, a good terminus would be when we reach ground level. So essentially, as you can see here, I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit more, Chris. I'll try to do the same. The scale on the left that shows 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. The ground level is essentially the orange bar that is across the top portion of the screen. So when the wall ends, anybody walking or driving will be at ground level. They will no longer be at a position that is higher than the backyard or higher than the home. So that was another control point. And then I think the first iteration also didn't necessarily connect all the way to the top of the bridge. So we had heard loud and clear from the community that when the vegetation came down, they could literally hear people that were walking along the sidewalk and the conversations that they were having. So we felt that we needed to arrive to an agreement to connect to the top of the bridge. It was never a negotiation with OCTA. It was just a matter of working through the process and then explaining that logic to Caltrans. So it did take some time, but that's essentially the longer version of how we got to this length.
So Candace asks, how do we address the sound issues that will be increasing due to the closer roadway? Again, in terms of the analysis that was done, it's a noise analysis prepared as part of the environmental process and environmental phase of the project. The area did not qualify for a new sound wall. So, I think that, issues on the arterial there, it's a little bit more difficult. You do have, and I know Mr. North has talked about this before, the fact that this roadway has been, is wider now, than I think in past years. It is something you're sort of dealing with, but this wall is definitely not part of that. And the analysis that's done from the environmental analysis is done as part of the freeway project, part of the freeway improvement project that looks at the preliminary designs and the widening of the project and the widening of the bridges showed that a wall, was not feasible in this area, right? So it didn't qualify for a wall in this area. Jill says, so in between the community wall and the back of our houses, that's where the landscaping will be. That's correct, although the landscaping will extend further south, right? And that's the area I think we need, and I know my team in the background is gathering questions for us that we don't have answers to right now, but we'll take a look at the landscaping plans and be able to share with you. I don't know that they're actually complete because they had to be revised, but we'll share with you the boundaries of the landscaping placement, so you'll be able to see that. The Norths say, when will the southbound Bolsa Chica exit be moved? Earlier on the presentation, I showed you a little bit of the overview schedule here. So let me just take a look back at that. So if you notice, for example, the Valley View off-ramp, that was one of the first ramps that I think it actually was the first ramp we closed for an extended period to reconfigure. And that was closed for approximately a month. I think the two ramps for this, the southbound off-ramp and the southbound on-ramp, they will be closed for approximately 1 month or 5 weeks, I think in the case of another one, of 5 weeks and a couple of days. And that is expected to happen in fall of 2021, so late 2021. So Jill says, is the width of Bolsa Chica behind Anawood the final width, or will the street be moved closer to our homes? On that side of the street, so on the northbound side of Bolsa Chica Road, no, the roadway is not going to be moving any closer to homes.
Nikki, did you want to address the speeding comment? I think Debbie says something.
Yes, I'm trying to post them as they come in. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Let's see. I'll post that one now.
So that's a really very timely question, actually. We are in the process of approving a new speed survey for the entire city. A speed survey is an engineering study that is conducted by the Traffic Engineering Division, so I'm responsible for that study. And essentially, it establishes speed limits throughout the city. And we collected the necessary data before the freeway project construction efforts started. That was something that I'm very proud of. I don't think I think other agencies along the corridor or a part of these types of mega projects tend to overlook the fact that you can potentially have a speed limit that expires, because speed limits do expire. Mm-hmm. And rather than allowing speed limits to expire and put ourselves in a position where our police are unable to enforce speeds, we were able to collect data before the project got started We're processing the data today, and we're going to be bringing that data to the city council in the near future. So look. I'll actually email the community when this goes to the traffic commission if you want to participate in that conversation. But the good thing for Bolsa Chica is that after conducting the survey analysis for the roadway, we will not be recommending any increases to Bolsa Chica Road. I won't bore everybody with the details of California's speed trap laws and all that other good stuff, but traffic speeds tend to increase throughout California when there is insufficient enforcement. And a lot of the times insufficient enforcement can come as it pertains to a construction effort, because the configuration is constantly changing, and perhaps a motor officer might feel that a speeding citation is not going to be withheld if challenged in court. That's not really the approach of our city. Our city has been enforcing speed out there, but there's always the perception that when construction starts, enforcement tends to reduce along the corridor. That isn't the case. But in addition to that, I can assure you that the speed limit on Bolsa Chica will remain what it is today. I know that's a little higher than all of us would like it to be. When the city obtained grants for the median project several years ago, we obtained competitive grant funding. We were able to keep that speed limit down because building the median down the center of the roadway does reduce speeds. So addressing the issue of speeds, we're going to continue to enforce. We have a speed survey that's going to be renewed by the city council this summer, and your speeds on this corridor will not be going up. In fact, when the project is completed, we will come back and then resurvey the road again in hopes of achieving a lower speed limit threshold. So I hope that made sense. But I wanted to update the community on speeds in the corridor.
So Cheryl Burrell asks, what will address the noise if this wall isn't intended for that? The structure's in place, right? So there's a wall being built that's curving around the backside of Buckingham, Ms. Burrell, as you know. And then there is an existing sound wall. I think part of that remains. Adolfo, between the bridge and the neighborhood, right about here. I'm trying to remember what the structure is there.
I can't recall right now.
So what we'll have to do is take a look at the plans. But the bottom line is, and we have another question from Dean talking about the noise analysis there. So the noise analysis showed that the area didn't qualify for a wall. We're going by state and federal standards. We can certainly provide to you rather the environmental document, the noise analysis. We can look up the specific details of the analysis that was done in that area and provide that information to you. But it's going by, the entire environmental process is led by the California Environmental Quality Act and the National Environmental Policy Act and the guidelines that are in there with respect to noise. And Caltrans has a very strict set of standards to analyze that and determine, the thresholds at which a wall is ultimately constructed. And there are feasibility and reasonability elements associated with that as well.
Yeah, and years ago, before the contractor was brought on board and before I had the pleasure of working with this team, that's actually the main points of contact for 405 through OCTA. I worked with the preliminary design team. And the city of Westminster did challenge the findings of the environmental impact report as it pertains to the sound analysis. And we had multiple conversations that went on for a very long time and resulted in us participating in conference calls with the head air noise guy out of Sacramento. And we were unsuccessful in kind of closing some gaps that we felt were necessary. But again, like Chris stated, there is an analysis methodology that goes into it. And as much as we lobbied for extending some walls, it always came back that when they provided us with the detailed information of the data collection, it never met that threshold. So that was the challenge we tried to overcome, but were unsuccessful in doing so. And again, that was something that the city lobbied for, not just in this area, but in other parts of the corridor, way before the project was actually a construction project, back in the early stages.
So we have.
I do want to respond, Nikki. I'm sorry. One more thing. Dean asked, was the noise analysis done with future increase in traffic in mind? And yes, it definitely was done. That's exactly how it's modeled. So they do. There were 3 alternatives that were evaluated, and then a 4th alternative of no build. Right. So they ultimately review 4 alternatives in the environmental analysis. And in the case of the noise study, it looks at the current year when the noise analysis is done, and then it projects out in future years. Right. So it is done with the consideration of additional traffic.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more on that, Chris. As you know, the SCAG region, we cooperate very closely with SCAG, and at one point, I know there was some skepticism that the model numbers were essentially local OCTA model numbers, and in all honesty, those numbers are in line with the SCAG model. So the SCAG model is the regional model, and then each county develops their own internal model. So the modeling effort is really based on the Southern California model, and we went into great depths to try to confirm that the appropriate analysis methodology was used, and I can attest that it was. That's kind of the background I came from before I joined the city, was regional modeling.
Okay, we have Cheryl, Mrs. Burrell on to ask questions.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, great. Everybody's addressing the wall, and you had mentioned the wall between the wall that comes off the freeway. There is no wall there anymore. And that's why I was wondering, because that noise just funnels through the corridor now. If that's being looked at all, or the sound wall that's there is what it is.
And Cheryl, that's actually what we'll have to take a look at. So there's the new wall that's coming back behind your property, right?
Right.
And then that's the question I had, and I've already asked the team to look into that off to the side. So hopefully we have a response before the end of the discussion here. But if not, we will of course report back to the entire meeting and let you know what we find.
Okay. And also, this might be a little off topic and can be addressed later when it's appropriate, is the dust and, again, the noise mitigation, because our houses are just a constant mess always.
Right. Anything's on topic right now for this meeting. So the contractor is required, as you know, and as I've said, and Adolfo said, required to mitigate dust. They do that by typically using water trucks or applying a soil binder. Right now, there's a soil binder applied to the slope, to the embankment behind your house. I saw
Is that
it
the green stuff?
That's the green stuff, exactly. And the good thing about the green stuff is it means the contractor's not going to be coming back there a lot, because if they trample the green stuff, they got to reapply it, right? But dust mitigation, I would agree with you, has not been their strong point, and we are hitting that home every opportunity we get. One of the benefits is that, not benefits, but one of the things to note about this segment of the project is the contractor has a relatively responsive APM, or area project manager. And if we work through the outreach folks on the contractor side and reach out to the APM, he gets on things pretty quickly. He understands the impact to the community, I think, a little bit better than some of the crews in the field might. So they're really, trying to address that. But let me just say that if you have had any kind of damage, I know Mr. Tu has mentioned this as well, and I think the North and you, if you feel like there's been damage, there's still more dust to come, as we know, but it's further away. It's happening further away from you, which is a good thing. It's happening on the other side of that screen, that privacy screen. But if you feel like there's been some damage, put in a claim. We will run that through. We will facilitate that process for you. And if it needs to get, if you want somebody to come clean up the backyard, we will tell them, hey, they want somebody to come clean up the backyard. We can't guarantee they'll do that, of course, but we will do our best to facilitate the discussion and try to get that to happen. Meanwhile, we'll keep pushing on them to institute their mitigation measures. The noise itself, they, except for when they're doing pile driving, and of course, typically, in fact, not typically, always pile driving should be during the daytime. They have to meet that threshold of 86 decibels, no louder than 86 decibels, 50 feet away from the construction activity. They monitor noise, they monitor vibration as part of this. Nikki can attest to that in her conversations with both the contractor and the community. And they have to meet these requirements. So if it's most likely, if you're hearing something that is louder than you think it should be, it's probably most likely within the threshold. But just let us know, and we will go speak to the contractor and try to find out, hey, what's happening? You know, what was that activity? What caused that loud vibration? What caused that loud noise? And we'll do our best to again remind them, listen, you're working right next to a neighborhood. I would like to ask the community, have you noticed a difference since the work has shifted sides? Do you feel like it's any better at all?
Well, yeah, because the machines are right on the other side of our houses now. They're on the other side of Bolsa Chica.
Right.
So yes, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, I haven't seen it because the embankment is very steep. Because they've built it up to meet the elevation of New Bolsa Chica Road. So
Right.
I haven't seen them, although there's foot traffic back there now because there's no gates or walls or anything stopping people from walking back there.
There's
And
foot
not
traffic
crews.
back
These
there.
I'm talking people. I mean, there's a tent already built down the way a little bit from a homeless person that's there. So
Okay. We will address that now tonight. We will email them tonight and contact our safety side as well and ask that it be addressed immediately.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a concern of mine too, though, because when people are walking back there, it gives them visual access to our property, and I don't feel like I can put anything of value back there because all they have to do is hop over the fence. If my dog's inside, then there's no way to protect it.
Yeah, and speaking of Mr. Two, yes, the land behind us will become a homeless encampment. How do you plan on addressing that? and I think that's a valuable point. Adolfo, I don't know if this is something that the city will be involved in as well as Caltrans or what's set up there, but this is the state right of way, and they have the responsibility, you know, of addressing homelessness.
Right. Yeah, homelessness it's really the focus of the whole COVID conversation that seems to be happening, rightfully so, throughout the county. A big portion of that conversation revolves around the homeless population and how to address those needs. So I know that the cities, through some of the CARES Act funding that is provided, is doubling up their effort. I know that there was a period of time very early on in COVID where we were trying to minimize contact with the public. So our police officers were trying to stay in their vehicles as much as possible to not expose people or become exposed, right? And I know that as things are starting to get going again, our homeless liaison officer has been given the green light to get out there and start to make contact with these folks and address their needs. So I know that there's a lot more resources that the city is going to have available to them moving forward to address the homeless situation. And Chris, you mentioned a good point. I know it is Caltrans right of way, but when it comes to making contact and trying to address the homeless situation, our city doesn't differentiate within Caltrans right of way. What we would rely on is Caltrans to come in, collect the debris if it is in Caltrans right of way, because as you know, we can't enter Caltrans right of way without an encroachment permit. But from an enforcement standpoint, they can definitely engage the homeless population and provide them with support, which is ultimately what we find is the most successful way of not just displacing them for a day or moving them along, but rather trying to address the issue.
Yeah, and that support typically comes from OC Health. So typically there are a couple of members from the OC Health department that accompany. CHP will go out. I think Caltrans posts signs initially. They have 72 hours to clear, and then CHP will be support for them. But ultimately, OC Health comes out, and I believe either CHP or the Sheriff's Department assists with, finding resources that will help them. So it's just not, they're being removed for the day. There's a lot of effort to do that, but we definitely understand that it is a concern. One of the things that I'm that I will do is find out what else beyond the landscaping will be going there, because of course, most of the state right of way is fenced in, right? So we'll find out what the status is of that.
I had one more issue too. Chris, you had said something
Sure.
about filing claims for damage
Yes.
and for like cleaning and stuff like that. And I think I've addressed this with you before, is how do we put a cost on stuff that we have to do ourselves? I mean, we're constantly hosing our yards off, our stuff in our backyards off, washing our cars more than normal. How do we put a number on that and file a claim?
The way I would approach that is to document it, right? And with, first of all, photos of whatever damage, and dust, gathering dust, you would be dealing with. And once you've got the documentation, and then clean it off, show that as well. That's again documentation. You have, if you've done it all yourself, you have a water bill. I would use that as documentation. I think any means necessary to support your case, your claim, if you will. One of the other things I'll do is I'll reach out to OCTA has a risk management group. I'll reach out to them and ask them that question. Is there something that a property owner could do because I'm no expert, right? But let's ask the experts and see if they have some ideas about how to further document the situation and file a claim with something like that.
And the city would like to know, Chris, also the status of these claims. Our city manager is very concerned with how the project may be affecting the community. I know we had issues with flooding. I won't mention where, but we had issues with flooding that you guys were very responsive, and I know there were claims and there was a process, and we were in the loop on what the status was of those claims. And I'd like you to continue that engagement with the city as it pertains to claims related to Bolsa Chica as well.
Certainly, and that's not a problem. That's easy to do, and I think in large part, I don't know if the exact settlement is shareable, right? But certainly we can find out the status of claims with either through the insurer, because we I believe we're co-insured. I can't remember how our risk management team phrases it, but we're sort of part of that process. So I can obtain that through our risk management team. If there's anything specific to Westminster, we can I would imagine it's as easy as a computer search.
Okay, and as far as damage goes, could you or would you mind emailing us the people to contact as well? Because there's several of us have noticed new cracks. Our leaning wall has leaned even farther. So
sure, document.
Yeah.
Please take those photos. But yes, we'll email the group with it. Basically, what you're dealing with though is a claims email. It's claims at oc405.com. And we'll send that to you. But the way we want you to handle this is to send it to us.
Right.
Send it to the 405 Project email address, the one you always contact us at. And you're welcome to CC the claims team, but we want to be able to track all that, right? If you send it directly to them and don't include us, we have no way to track it. So it's much better if you send it to us, but then we will send it to them. We will let you know, and then you'll let us know, hey, we haven't heard from them. It's been a week. Hey, we haven't heard from them. It's been 30 days.
Okay.
Help us out. And then we will ensure that we reach out to them on your behalf and say, what's the status? What's going on? They do have a person who's, I would say, very competent and understands what she's doing. She's a claims adjuster, and she's the second person who's helped in the claims process and has really been efficient and made good headway on a lot of the issues that are out there. So she'll help us.
Okay. And then one last thing, and I don't want to take up everybody's time here.
No problem at all.
With the upcoming work coming, I know it's on the other side of Bolsa Chica, but we're still going to have the effects of it. So are we left for, let's say this project's supposed to be finished in 2021, the end of 2021. So we're just going to have to hang tough again like we've been doing, or, do we do the same thing? Or, it's like, it doesn't seem like we're getting any better during this project in what we have to endure.
I can say that it should be, it sounds like, and again, like I said, the equipment's, like you said, rather, and like I had hoped and anticipated, the equipment being on the other side lowers the sound issue, lowers the noise issue a little bit, hopefully addresses the dust issue somewhat as well.
And don't forget the vibration and the pounding of the ground too.
Absolutely, and yet that is further away. So hopefully you'll experience a lot less of it over this next year. But it is continuing for a year, and they do have to work within standards. They have to work within certain thresholds. They are monitoring that, so they need to meet those thresholds. And if they're not, they're held accountable for that. But unfortunately, yes, you're dealing with one more year of this activity through the middle of next year. Mm-hmm. Remember, though, that a lot of the heavy work, on the schedule, the pile driving, which is coming up, that's going to be daytime. It is going to be frustrating. I know a lot of people are now working from home, as am I, as you can see from the background, and my daughter walking back and forth. But you're dealing with a lot of these daytime activities now. It's a little bit more since we're dealing with coronavirus, but they are happening further away. You've got the establishment of the foundation. Once that's in place, there's a little bit of a respite there as they're starting to build the sides and the center columns. In fact, once we get to that point and the substructure of the bridge is built, we start to move into that superstructure. That's a little bit less of an impact. There's still night work, but again, you've got a massive, structure, half of a structure that's in between you and that night work now. And hopefully we won't be dealing with these lighting issues, this light intrusion from crews anymore, or just that it'll be minimal. I know there is still some activity. They have told us that they do think they will still be accessing the work site from the northbound Bolsa Chica side. They have shown no indication of how they will actually do that. So I don't think it will actually come from northbound Bolsa Chica, but it will come from under the new bridge. We'll have to see that. We'll have to see what happens there. So they may have some activity still along the southbound freeway, that might, affect those on Buckingham perhaps a little bit more. I'll try to, I've asked them to please give me as much notice about that as possible so I can share it with the community. But the majority of the work really is occurring further away on the other side of this new bridge. So that should help.
Okay. Well, if not, I'm sure you'll hear from us. As always.
Yeah, absolutely. I did hear back from the team. I just want to mention that we're going to need to explore this a little bit further, this sense of a wall, along the merging southbound on-ramp. So that might help address, some of the sound stuff, but I want to look at the plans and have a clear picture of that, and then we'll share that with the community.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any additional questions?
Yes, we do. So I'm going to kick you out, Cheryl. Okay.
All right. Candace says, I'm concerned that my property values will be going down due to the increased traffic and noise, and my taxes will be raised to take care of the new wall, even though it doesn't go behind my house. So I can't speak to property values. I just have no way to assess that or no way to know what the case is. I think I understand the concern with respect to, property taxes or taxes going up. I think that's, again, not an issue that I've got the expertise in. It's probably a concern that you would want to bring up with the city and express those concerns. I don't really have a good response for you, Candace. I'm sorry on that one. It is difficult, right? Because you're dealing with, a freeway that was built in the 60s and was a lot smaller than it is now. And it has dealt with, You're dealing with increase in growth, right? An increase in population growth, an increase in job growth, and that's only expected to go higher in Orange County. And I think those are difficult issues that you face when you're a property owner and you're faced with progress. You're faced with a widening freeway. You're faced with a need to address the increase in traffic. It likely would be worse if we didn't try to address this. You look in the environmental analysis, there is a no build option, an analysis there, and the impact on traffic and therefore the impact on air quality would go up. So there are other ways to sort of look at this too, that the impacts of not doing anything are pretty tremendous as well. But I empathize. I wish I could help answer that question a bit more clearly. And I don't know, Adolfo, if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I know I did a lot of work as a consultant before I joined the city, and I worked in the Inland Empire a great deal in the 2001, 2002 time period. And one of the biggest issues for communities to deal with is really when you're linking up roadways. I think you're still seeing that in South County. And when you're dealing with that reality, I think you are 100% right about increased traffic, right? If you have a bridge that was never built in the 60s and now we're connecting it to the rest of the mobility network, then you are going to be dealing with drastic trends of traffic shifts. That's really not the case on this project. Every bridge that is in place will be reconstructed. So we're not creating new linkages between neighborhoods that weren't there before. In fact, one of the things I was going to mention is, if anything, we're taking this, the cities were very proactive very early on in the process to making sure that this project addressed some operational issues that have been there for a very long time. So like on Bolsa Chica behind your homes, there was a lane drop. We widened the road to a certain point and it went from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. We had side swipes there all the time. So that becomes more of an operational issue. And what we're doing, the way we're viewing it, is by having OCTA build these bridges to the ultimate width, which is not necessarily a part of the widening project originally. We are mitigating a lot of those other areas that are hot spots for traffic collisions, because 3 lanes taper down to 2, or 2 lanes, open up to 3. Those transitions, when it comes to motorists, those become the hot spots. And we paid really close attention to that. So, I'm not really going to agree with the community about more traffic on Bolsa Chica. I think that would have happened regardless of whether there was a new freeway project or not. People need to go to where they need to go. What we focused on was making sure that we address those deficiencies, like the lane drop here. We addressed the lane drop on Golden West and Bolsa, which I think is going to be tremendous over by the 99-cent store. I can't wait for that bridge to open up, because we've had issues over there all the time. And remember, we're talking about lane drops in other parts of the city where there's a parking lane. So we're talking about vehicles essentially trying to weave between a parking lane and merge at the last second. There's a lot of other issues, a lot of other areas that we're cleaning up as well. But I think we're doing a great job of cleaning up potential safety issues. In this particular location, the off-ramp, teeing it off as an intersection, I think is going to do wonders for the movements there. I know going south and trying to merge at Old Bolsa Chica and kind of arrive to a stop in some cases, depending on how the light is cycling, that's going to go away. Now you're coming off of a 90-degree intersection. So a lot of those improvements we've worked with OCTA to address as part of the project. So I'd like the community to focus on those issues, because I think we've done a lot of good there. The median, I think I got about $4 million to put those medians in about 10 years ago. Traffic volumes, traffic speeds went down, traffic collisions went down. So we are paying attention to those things that I think are really quality of life issues. But as far as traffic is concerned, I think, OCTA projects during normal conditions 1% per year growth in traffic. We'll see what the trends are when we get to a connected vehicle world, if we get there in our lifetime. But for now, we're still seeing trends trend upward. COVID has really knocked everything back significantly, but we're trying our best to address safety.
Chris,
I can't hear you, Chris.
You're on mute.
That's probably a good thing, guys. No. The North's asked any noise abatement plans, i.e. signs, enforcement. And I'll leave that to you, Adolfo, I think.
Well, I'm thinking this is related to construction.
Oh, okay. Let's clarify that. Mr. and Mrs. North, is that related to the construction or noise on Bolsa Chica? Meanwhile, while we're learning more about that, Dean asks, with the new southbound 405 on-ramp, is there an estimate how this wall will affect the percentage of traffic increase?
Definitely, we can look at the numbers and provide you. I mean, that's all part of the environmental impact report, part of the traffic analysis. I mean, one of the most complicated traffic studies I worked on was the review of this analysis. So we can definitely let you know, and I think the PM peak hour is a good indicator. We can say, if Mr. Dean is interested in this, we could say, okay, here's what the off-ramp carries today, and here's what the right turn movements will be with the new intersection configuration. There's definitely a shifting around by being more flexible at that location and allowing north and southbound traffic. If that's of interest to him, we can show him what the numbers look like. That's all in the environmental document. It's impossible to find, but we can find it for him.
Right, yeah. So the traffic analysis that's done in the environmental document is going to include all that information. Yeah. So, any changes to the geometry, changes to the roadway, changes to the design are going to include that information. Yes. So Ida says, did the noise analysis factor in the loss of all the trees which absorbed a lot of noise? So the noise analysis, I do not believe, considers landscaping. Caltrans does not, the Caltrans standards do not include any sort of provision for noise being absorbed by landscaping. They make that pretty clear that they do not believe that is the case. And that's backed up by studies and backed up by specialists in noise. That landscaping does not absorb or block noise.
So the Norths responded and said no about loud exhaust, trucks, and brakes, etc. So the enforcement and signs, I think that's what they're referring to, those items.
That'd be with respect to like on Bolsa Chica and city enforcement.
We'll definitely continue to enforce the corridor for speeding. I know that right now our signal timing coordination out there is a little bit different because of the configuration of the roadway. Most vehicles driving Bolsa Chica under normal conditions will need to stop at that intersection very little. Typically it rests in green is what traffic engineers call it, because the only real access to that side street is the Bolsa Chica storage, which obviously is not 24-hour a day peak, and then the Caltrans maintenance facility back there, and some activity to the Naval Weapons Station. So resting in green is what it usually is, and that could be an indication to continue to address it for speeding concerns. I know we have those issues really at most overcrosses in the city where there's an open highway. So we'll continue to monitor that.
The Norths also talk about 1085 wall looks good. Can you provide landscape plans when complete? Yes, we will look at how to get those to folks. I think there's always a little bit of tweaks going on with landscape plans, throughout the project. There is a theme though, and there's a document that sort of guides the landscaping. What I was hoping is, we could provide some examples of some of the kinds of trees that are coming in and things like that. So we'll also look to do that as quickly as possible. And typically the landscaping is done at the end of the project. So we'll get confirmation of when they plan to do that activity as well. And there is a plant establishment component, right, where the contractor has to be responsible for landscaping and irrigation through this period. this plant establishment period. So, and it's basically so the plants can be established before the Caltrans will take over the landscaping and maintenance of it. So that's typically the contractor wants to make sure that nothing is going to damage the plants they install prior to installing them. So they want to make sure they're clear of the area in terms of construction before they do that work. So the Norths again say, will there be weight limitations for trucks using the ramp and bridge? That is a little bit outside of my scope of expertise. I'm certain that there are limitations. I don't know if it's, these, as Adolfo mentioned, these bridges are being built to their final configuration per what's known as the Master Plan of Arterial Highways. And they're going to be built to Caltrans standards to withstand whatever appropriate weight limits. And I would imagine, based on what I've seen, it's going to be the same for all the bridges. So I don't know if there's going to be any. I don't know if there are going to be any restrictions or limits on that. I mean, you've obviously got oversized loads, right, that you have to deal with. But
yeah, it's a truck route, and I think there's a lot that goes along with identifying roadways as truck routes. I know it's interstate commerce laws come into play when it comes to that. So the idea of this no longer being a truck route, that's never going to be the case. It will continue to be a truck route. I know the city issues wide load permits. We do have quite a bit of wide load permits making their way into the industrial part of Huntington Beach. So this is a popular corridor to avoiding more of the busy part of town. But all of those wide load permits are processed in the city, and it's something that our police are very vigilant of. Our police have also received commercial vehicle training. So unlike a lot of local police departments that would rely on California Highway Patrol to, out of the goodness of their heart, set up a commercial vehicle truck zone inspection, as maybe we've seen them stumble upon that in the past, our police have actually gone to the training so they can do some level of commercial enforcement, which I think puts the city in a really good spot as far as certain corridors that carry a lot of trucks.
Good. Chris 2 asks, or mentioned the fact, to add to what Cheryl said, now that the crews aren't on this side, I've seen 4 to 5 homeless people wandering through. That's definitely something we need to jump on. I'm betting that before we finish this meeting, we'll have sent an email to our team, the technical team already, to let them know about this, and we'll alert OC405 as well. There's a group dedicated to just this issue and clearing things out throughout the corridor. Obviously, there is a process, because we want to make sure the homeless population, can be. As Adolfo points out, we sort of have these, as I mentioned too, they have wraparound services. We try to provide them with all the support that we can, so they actually don't come back. Nikki, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to add to that, he also mentioned it seems like no one is monitoring back there. But to add to what you were saying, I was told, because I got a request for removal of a homeless encampment or notification in another part of the project. And the construction team is working on that, and it's been a few days. They're working with Caltrans on that, but there are extra steps and different protocols that are being put in place because of COVID. So it's not as smooth as a process or as clear as a process as it normally is. So just FYI.
But clearly that's something that you would be worried about too, as property owners, and having somebody who might potentially be be carrying the coronavirus, right, close to you. So Debbie says, when was the noise analysis determined? So the final environmental document came out in 2015. I believe the noise analysis was done between 2011 and 2013, somewhere in there, right, Adolfo? I think closer to 2011. But again, it's modeled and projected out through the design year of the project, which is 2040 on this one, I believe. So there's analysis done then, and it accounts for, again, this increase in traffic over time. And I will say that we heard back from a member of the technical team that a noise analysis was done to address sort of this tunnel effect of noise between Bolsa Chica and the southbound 405. and it was determined that there were no issues. So there, just that information. But again, we need to come back at this. With some details about any kind of additional walls there, not additional walls, but walls there. What's planned? Candace says, who is paying for the non-sound wall? That is being absorbed as a project cost. So it is being paid for by the project.
By OCTA.
By OCTA, that is correct. But, I always like to be transparent on that question. We're paying for it. You are, and I am, through our taxes, right? OCTA is funded through a half-cent sales tax on, throughout the county. It's transportation improvements, and Measure M is the measure that allows that tax to be collected, and that's you and me paying that. So it's the half-cent sales tax on whatever you're purchasing in the county. So I think that's important to note.
Yeah, since you're talking about, I guess, transparency, Chris, one of the things I wanted to mention, we had tried to address certain operational issues on corridors in the city, and we did that through OCTA grant funds many, many moons ago. And when it came time to proposing design exemptions to reduce the number of lanes over a bridge, to be able to introduce a third lane, it was a multi-year process, and the city was unsuccessful in obtaining those betterments for the community. I think lost in all of this dust and noise and construction is the fact that this project along the corridor allowed us to address issues that, if it wasn't for the project, would probably remain in place for many, many, many years, because the process to try to get them corrected is set up to be a very difficult process. So as part of this OCTA project, some things that could have taken years to address, we addressed in one meeting. We sat down and we said, hey, build it to the maximum number of lanes per the MPAH. Conversation done, implemented. That conversation there could have easily been years and years. It would have led to the city having to lead a construction effort to widen a bridge. Never would have happened. So I think there's a lot of good that often is lost in a lot of these conversations. And of course, as the transportation person, I get excited about all that stuff, and I understand the difficulty. I just wanted to put that out there because it is something that gets lost in the communication of such a complicated effort.
So Christy has another question. I wanted to acknowledge Herb and Remy Northo about addressing the damage claims issue. Yes, anything we can do to facilitate that, we will do for you, because we recognize that you're having to deal with this. It's a cost to you, and beyond the emotional cost, of dealing with the noise and the traffic and the dust. So for sure. So Chris 2 says, when we met with you all last year, us homeowners brought up the possibility of getting the land behind us. Is that still on the table? And if not, why? So that is state property. It's a state right of way, and they have no interest in selling that to homeowners, if you will. It's an area that they need to manage, as especially as they take back the operation element and maintenance element of the highway system of this 16-mile stretch of project. And they're not going to give up any of the land. In fact, throughout this process, what's I think come to light is a lot of issues with the right-of-way line, as it is throughout the project area, and all of that's had to be cleaned up through the process and clarified and remapped and everything. So there's no intention of this on the state's behalf of selling their land to private property owners. Chris has another question. How do we document foundation issues when we can't take pics under our homes? And what will happen when the project ends, but we start seeing structural issues due to the 2 to 3 years of construction work that has taken place? So that's a question that's a little bit outside of my purview. I think that's, I don't have anything but my own sort of take on what I would try to do. And I mean, I don't know if you need to get a structural person in to examine things. But that's sort of beyond the scope. I think if you wanted to lay out a claim, for that and ask them to do the analysis for you. We can, we can forward that to the 405 claims department. We can bring that up with our risk management team, ask them that question, and circle back with you and see if they have some suggestions. But this is a little out of the scope of my understanding. And I don't know if Adolfo, you have any thoughts on that, or Nikki.
No, I wanted to add that I think it's definitely a question that we need to answer for Chris, or do a little bit more research. I know on the city side, we are dealing with that on a monthly basis, and you guys are a part of those coordination meetings with the program manager. Is, well, when does the city, become owner of a roadway? Because there's a maintenance period that will still be under the contract. I should know the year, but I think it's a year. I'm not sure what time period it is. But as things are finishing up on this project, does the window begin when you guys say we're done, or are we waiting for the project to be over before that time clock begins? So we're dealing with a lot of the same questions. So I'm very curious to see what the answer is for Chris, because we're expecting some clarification on that on the city side as well, for sidewalks, roadways, walls, all kinds of things that are being built.
Yeah, so we will seek guidance on that and get back to the group for sure. So the North say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think they specifically asked about tractor trailers before. So that's why I was putting this question back up.
Gotcha. Weight restrictions, but it's the same thing, right? The bridge is built to certain standards, and I don't think there are any plans for weight restrictions, limitations, none that I've heard.
Yeah, I think the California Vehicle Code would dictate that limit. I don't really know the limit off the top of my head, but I know that definitely there is a top threshold for what a heavy duty truck, what we like to call in traffic, a heavy duty truck carries. And then beyond that, it requires a special permit that would need to go through the city and then assessed on a case-by-case basis. But your everyday big rig, we want to call it that, will be allowed to travel down Bolsa Chica. Contrary to what most people know about this, is big trucks can deliver into even a neighborhood as long as they're making a legitimate delivery. They can be off of the truck route if the driver demonstrate that he needed to get off the truck route to make a legitimate delivery. So there's always that aspect of judgment when it comes to enforcing truck routes. But sticking to Bolsa Chica, it will remain a truck route for big rigs. You're muted.
I'm so rarely muted. Pardon me. I didn't want to distract people with the noise in the background here. So Candace says, I've been a resident for more than 40 years, so I've seen the progress and increase in traffic and noise. If you would extend the wall, it would help immensely with noise abatement, even though the wall isn't designed specifically for sound. So, I want to re-emphasize that the height and length of the wall were determined based on a headlight study, right? The analysis of trucks and vehicles coming off the new southbound off-ramp and the projected headlight height, and the horizontal spread. It's really focused on that. It is not focused on sound. You got to remember that this is an additional, we're probably talking somewhere close to $1 million to construct this, that OCTA, you all are, again, paying your taxes, right? And I agree with that, but it's another $1 million for the project cost that is having to be absorbed, because it's not like we can get more money and incorporate into this. And it's got to have a very clear set of criteria for constructing it. It was a very lengthy conversation. We're just coming to you now with the results of it. It was a lengthy conversation between the city and OCTA and Caltrans in order to come up with the solution. And it has to work within the parameters that the decision was made. So it's not going to be extended.
And it wasn't an easy mitigation either. I got to say it looked very shaky at some point in the conversation for quite some time, which is why all we kept telling the community was that we're still working on it, because we did encounter some significant challenges and differences of opinion between us and Caltrans, really. And so we were able to work through that. So we're very proud of what we ended up with. but it definitely was not an easy
Right.
delivery.
And truthfully, thank you for your patience on that. I know you've asked the question many times, and I've been unable to respond to it. And it's, I'm writing these emails at night, wanting to, and I save up. You're hearing from me typically in the evening time because I know I want to be able to focus and spend some time on responding to your concerns. And I do appreciate the patience that you all have shown the project, and thankful for that. Cheryl Burrell mentioned, speaking for my neighbor at the end of the cul-de-sac on Buckingham, will the temporary barrier be put back in place? It was taken down and never put back. Only old chain link separates him from the freeway. I would see that as potentially an issue because of construction going on right now. So yes, we will absolutely look into that and find out what the status is. If you could email us, if it made sense, Cheryl, for you to do the emailing, or your neighbor, whomever, let us know the address so we're clear on the area. I think that would be most helpful. That'd be great. Will pedestrians, Cheryl has another question, will pedestrians have access to the opposite side of the new overpass walkway area? Will it be gated or closed off? The new overpass walkway on the opposite side.
Will there be sidewalk on both sides is how I'm reading that.
Yeah, sidewalk on both sides, bike lane only on one side on Bolsa Chica, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe it's on the, actually it's in the document that we have. So if somebody wants to take a look at the bridge fast facts and put it up in the message area, that would be great.
Yeah, and as the community goes out and explores the project, you'll notice that some of these off ramps, these slip ramps, are no longer nicely tapered and tight. They tend to be more of a 90-degree ramp. And the purpose of that is to enhance the pedestrian experience. So
make it safer.
Mm-hmm.
Chris T says, I also remember you guys mentioning property or land evaluations for our property lines. What happened to that? I will have to ask about that. I don't know if there's any. I think analyzing where the right-of-way line is, so perhaps a survey of that.
I can talk a little bit about that, Chris. I think one of the questions when we first met with the community was, I don't even know where my property limit is.
Right.
And
now I remember that.
At one point, we had the surveyors come out and place markers on the ground because back in those days, the community members were considering building a new wall during construction. And if they were going to, they wanted to know approximately or exactly where the property line was. Of course, once those markers were put in and then the trucks started coming through there, those were essentially obliterated by the movement of the vehicles. So that's a very reasonable ask, is for there to be a more permanent delineation of the property line. I know there's staking that can be done as part of that.
Yes, that's what I was just thinking. Is the contractor to get a survey crew out there and they could stake it, and that should be clear. What I'm also interested in is, and I don't know what the status is, but there should be a chain link fence delineating the state right of way as well.
Correct. That's a final install. Correct.
Yeah. So I want to see if that if we have some information about that.
So I just put Dean asked pretty much or mentioned the same thing. Yeah, but
okay, good. Yeah. So Dean is asking that. Yeah, excellent. Asking the same thing. Would the property lines be marked? And so we will get back to you on that. We will make a request to at least have the area staked at minimum, and then ultimately there will be a right-of-way fence installed. Debbie says, what suggestions do you have to decrease the noise? The trees that were removed absorb the majority of the noise. I have no protection from the noise of cars 24/7. So Debbie, I think what we're going to do is look at, I've asked the team to help me figure out what the delineation is, what the boundary areas are for the new landscaping coming in. I'm fairly certain there will be landscaping behind your property. The wall extends just about to the wall, the community wall up Bolsa Chica extends just about to your home, but I believe the landscaping extends further south. So we'll take a look at that and get back to you so you can have some more information about landscaping in that area. And that's, again, Caltransit's position is that landscaping does not attenuate noise. Only walls do. And in the analysis, environmental analysis, there was determination that no wall, that area did not qualify for a wall, which is why you don't have a wall wrapping all the way around behind the back of your properties. And again, the community wall is not meant to be a sound attenuating structure. Christy says, please clarify. So there's going to be a chain link fence behind our homes. I do need to clarify that, but it's my understanding that the right-of-way, the Caltrans right-of-way, which is the other side of your block wall, right? That is delineated by a chain link fence typically.
Correct.
So I believe that to be the case. And the North's note that the property line determination will help us with our own plans to fortify our backyards, right? Because you don't want to encroach into Caltrans right-of-way and have to deal with that.
I think it's tough to get an answer to this, Chris, but maybe Nikki can try her best. Is the community asking for the property line to be delineated in the near future during construction, or say after landscaping elements have been placed as a final measure for there to be a delineation? Because
it might be appropriate to wait until
I would say, unless the
landscaping is
community tells
completed.
otherwise, because I think there is going to be construction activity and placement of irrigation and plants, and those markers will disappear very quickly if we put them out there now. But
yeah, and I mean there are the roadway plans or whatever. All of those are going to have a right-of-way line on them, so you can see. But it's not really going to tell you exactly where the line is. It's only a line on a piece of paper. So it doesn't tell you anything if you're hoping to, as the North say, fortify your backyard.
and everybody had a different amount of space between their wall and the official property line too. So it is important to delineate the entire property line, because simply putting it on a few properties, that's only specific to that spot. It tends to vary through there. That's one of the things we found when we first did the markings early on.
And so, Chris, I think Chris is asking, what's the difference? Wouldn't the line be the same? And yes, the line would be the same, but I think the point is staking it, putting these wooden stakes in the ground. Those may get knocked out, moved, run over. They'll disappear between now and after the landscaping is done. So it may be best to wait until then to mark the line.
Right, and the actual property may not, the back part of the properties may not coincide with the neighbors. We had a property on there a few years back that actually still showed that owner owned half of Bolsa Chica Road, right? So that needed to be reset and reestablished. So the actual property for the property owners varies through there, although the right-of-way line might be a straight line. If everybody's property line varies slightly, then there is a different spacing that may be an opportunity for some to expand 4 feet. Might be worth it for them to move it back 4 feet. Others, their existing wall is exactly where it needs to be. So that, I think, comes into play as far as them making a decision whether replacing the wall is worth it.
The property owner making that decision, sure.
Correct.
So Cheryl Burrell says, do you know if a small drainage ditch will be placed next to the wall behind the house? I heard from the crews that it was planned. I'd have to check drainage plans, but I don't know that that's the case. I know there's a drainage channel under all of that has been constructed. And that was part of the, early on in the construction of the project there. But I haven't heard anything about a small channel being put behind the walls. And one of the most important things that I try to emphasize to members of the public is talking to the crews is great, but they really don't know what's going on, right? They've got a very specific job that they're doing, and it's fairly narrowly focused. So best for you to contact us, then we can go to the technical team, get the official answer, and give it back to you. That's not saying you can't talk to the crews, go for it, but you can't rely on the information that you're being given. We
can get that information back to you really quickly. I mean,
for sure.
We have met ever since we met the community, we've met. OCTA began meeting on a weekly basis with the city of Westminster. And although our agenda items have grown over the years, there is a Bolsa Chica bullet point item, and we talk about Bolsa Chica every Tuesday. In some cases, if it's just, things are ongoing, it's a very brief conversation. But if there's definitely something to research for the community, when we have everybody in the room, we're able to essentially assign duties to people to come back with responses, and then Chris will funnel that information back to you through his customized mailer that he does for you guys. So you guys are a part of our weekly conversations. I just wanted to mention that.
Even at my house.
I also wanted to add, as part of the bridge construction map that we are sharing in the files, because we mentioned this earlier, there will only be sidewalk on the northbound side, and bike lanes will be added to both sides of the new bridge. Based on that
so
map.
we have reversed.
And we do have a few more questions coming in.
Candace says, is there anything that can be done with the motorcycles that rev up behind our houses on Anawood right before they start the incline up to the top of the bridge? So you're talking about the intersection probably of Old Bolsa Chica Road and Bolsa Chica. Is that right? I would assume. Yeah, I think, Adolfo, that's probably a question for you.
No, we'll definitely, I mean, we have funds through this project to enforce the corridor, and we've been doing that. We've been on this corridor, and we've done some enforcement on Bolsa Chica, but I think once the ultimate configuration is completed, it is going to be very important for the city of Westminster to get out there and enforce these new roads. We will commit to doing that. I know our staffing has struggled over the years, but we are recently achieved a huge milestone in the city of Westminster. We're at full staffing for the police department, something we had not been able to accomplish over the many years of slowly trying to bring in new police officers. We're at full staffing, and I know that our current chief of police, Mark Lauterbach, used to be a motor officer when I met him many years ago, and he's committed to traffic safety. So that's not a very it's not a very difficult ask. We would definitely enforce the corridor.
Okay, and Cheryl clarified on this question that it's supposed to be between our wall and the new wall, is what she said.
The ditch is now an underground structure, right, Chris?
Yeah, it's a concrete channel underground. But we'll check. We'll speak to the technical team, ask for the drainage plans, and get you a sense of if there are any other drainage structures that are going to be back there at all. Debbie asks, and this is a fabulous question, I'm glad you asked this, is there a plan for the large pile of rebar behind my home? Ms. Wimmer has rebar cages, and those are for the upcoming work on the other side of the bridge, I believe. And they're for, actually, they may be for some of the wall work. I think they're cast-in drilled hole rebar cages. Ms. Wimmer, I have been working to try to get those moved. The response I got from one person was that there wasn't any other place to put them. You and I probably can agree that doesn't sound like the truth. So I'm going to work another couple of avenues, and do my best to try to get them moved. I just don't see why they need to be there. I'm sure you don't see why they need to be there. And so I'll keep working at it, I promise. Chris 2 says the same thing, as a big pile behind his house, and I will again do my best to get those moved. Sorry about that. You bring up a good point. Chris 2 again says, this is informative, but will we have to wait another year for updates? Can we get more frequent updates? So I will be completely honest with you and say that no, first of all, you won't have to wait another year. I'm going to do my best to hold more of these kinds of meetings. We will likely do them like this. We likely won't have them in person. They'll be virtual. The thing that made scheduling this meeting the most difficult, though, was the time it took to resolve the issues that you all brought up. And I didn't want to come out with, first of all, I'm not privy to all of the discussions that are going on. I mean, there are discussions that happen between, other members of the city team and the project team that I don't hear about, right? But I didn't want to come back to the community only to tell you, hey, hang on a little bit, just wait a little bit longer, kind of thing. I wanted to come back to you with some hope and some real information. We've only just gotten the sort of the go ahead on this, and I'm very pleased with that. Plus, incorporating meetings in, we're trying actually to do more of these types of interim meetings, because you shouldn't have to wait a year for a solid update like this. But we've got 16 miles of corridor, and that's actually 32 miles because we're talking to neighborhoods on both sides of the freeway through 6 cities. And we have a calendar of critical activities that helps us keep track of the things that are coming up. We are nonstop, the outreach team. It's a half dozen of us, and we move. We're working at 100% much of the week. So we're trying to do everything we can, but you definitely deserve communication more often, and we're going to work toward that for sure. So hopefully another, every maybe 4 months or so, we can give you an update on what's going on. We'll look for major milestones as the transition point for that. But please feel free, of course, to continue to email us with, and if there are updates that we can give you that way, we'll certainly do it. But we like this format a lot, and I hope it's helpful for you. Nikki, I think we covered that topic. Cheryl says, thank you. You're welcome, Cheryl. You guys have been very patient with us and understanding. And I realize, I spent a lot of time on the phone with Miss Wimmer in the past. And one of the things I learned from that discussion was that, we talk about this, right? Putting ourselves in your shoes, putting ourselves in the shoes of the public that is going through this pain. You're right. We are not living right there, right next to it necessarily. We have our own things going on, where there may be construction near our properties, but it's not the same as what you're dealing with. It's not exactly what you're dealing with. So one of the things I appreciated about Ms. Wimmer saying was, just tell us you're sorry. Tell us tell us you realize what we're dealing with. Tell us you understand our frustration, and we do. I drive the project on a regular basis. I look at all the activities that are going on. We see on a regular basis, we average probably about 150 inquiries a month through, whether it's email or by phone. And a good a third of those are frustration, dealing with dust, dealing with noise, dealing with the vibration and things like that. And so we know what you're going through, and we try to facilitate with the contractor being continually aware of the fact they're working next to people and they're affecting people's everyday lives. And it only got more difficult for you, I'm sure, as it did for us with the advent of COVID-19. So, our hats off to you for sort of managing this situation. And, we're here if you need to yell at us for anything, and we'll do our best to try to resolve the issue for you. Herb and Ramey North, very helpful. Thank you. You're very welcome. Yeah, anything we can do?
We don't have any more comments or questions.
All right. I want to say that I really hope, one of the things that Cheryl emailed us about not early on, but just before the meeting, was that hoping that they could ask questions outside of the presentation. That's another thing. We had the presentation on the traffic switch for Bolsa Chica, but we didn't take questions about this particular issue because I couldn't talk about it at that time. The issues that this neighborhood brought up. So I did have to hold that off. But yeah, this meeting was all about you guys and all about trying to help you get a sense of what's happening and how the issues that you raised, a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago, are being dealt with. And I hope it's been helpful. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all of the energy that my team has put in this. I really appreciate Adolfo being a part of the discussion. He's so incredibly knowledgeable, and I am so not incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to these traffic issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, if that's it, we'll say goodbye. Please email us at 405project@octa.net if you have any more questions, or give us a call on the helpline. We're there for you. We will have the team has captured all the questions that are outstanding. We will get answers to those, and we'll reply back to actually everybody who signed up for the meeting. So again, thank you for your time. Have a terrific night and a very safe rest of your week, and a happy holiday weekend. Thank you very much.